Welcome to Determined to Succeed. I'm your host, Dawn, also known as Unique Connector. So I'm so excited to have Sarah on the show today. I kind of giggle as before we even hit record, it's our first time meeting
Mhm.
officially, but I've been following her for years. I first was introduced to her through Darcy Loma.
Mm.
And then a friend suggested, like, oh, you should connect with her, follow her newsletter, you should know about her. And so I saw a great post online that you shared about hiring, and I just, me being me, reached out. I really gravitated towards it, and I thought, hey, I would love to connect, learn more about you, and love to hit record because I think you have so much knowledge to share with even my network. So I'm so thrilled to have you on the show, Sarah. And, you know, I, of course, I reached out to you about the hiring post. Let's even talk about that hiring post and maybe what drew you to even hit share on
Mm.
that post.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, thank you to Darcy and thank you to Jocelyn for connecting us, both awesome women in our shared communities. So much of the things that I have created over the years, I would say, come from lessons learned, sometimes the hard way. This is one of those. So Um, something that I have found interesting over the years is it has been much easier for me to support other teams and the companies I work with and the clients that I work with in helping them make good hiring decisions than it has for me to do that for myself in my own company. So, something I have realized about myself is over the years, I get really excited about people's potential and I can easily see people's potential, particularly through meeting them or talking about possibilities or having those introductory conversations. And it's very easy for me to get allured by that, and then overlook whether or not someone would actually be a good fit for my team, and my company at this moment in time. And so, for the most part, that has never resulted in anything catastrophic. I would say I had one experience that was pretty catastrophic and definitely a lesson learned. But for the most part, it has been more just a little bit of a mismatch where, maybe we were really aligned and we really got along well and we really liked each other, but fundamentally, what was needed for the job was maybe just slightly mismatched. And the light bulb really fully went on for me last year. I was working on bringing on an additional member of my team. And knowing this about myself, I enlisted one of the women on my team at the time to kind of help me with the hiring process. And so at that time, I had done an interview with this person, and she was delightful and amazing and just wonderful. And from a values perspective, she aligned so well with the values of our company. And so I started with the interview, and then I had her do a project and send me her project results. And because I had the interview in my mind, when I saw her project, I think I had cast a bit of a positive light over the project because I liked her so much and she was such a fit from a values perspective. And so I got the project and I reviewed it and I saw there were a few issues, but I thought it was maybe okay. And then I had my team member review it and she was like, Sarah, this is not good. Like she was like, Sarah, this is not what you asked for. These are not the outcomes that you were looking to receive. Like, and she had this really, factual, helpful list of the ways in which the project did not meet the objectives. And that was probably my biggest light bulb moment of the ways in which I can maybe oversolve for potential values alignment or potential in general and undersolve for whether or not the role is fundamentally a good fit. So since that moment, I have been working on refining the process to better solve for those things up front. And that's what sort of resulted, that's where this process that we're connecting about resulted from.
Okay, well, I have a question.
Yes.
One of your top strengths, like positivity.
It has been in the past. I think when I retook it more recently, it got bumped down to like 7 versus 5 or something. But in the past, I know the first time I took it, it was in my top five. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I
Hmm.
just asked you that because so that's one of my top strengths.
Hmm.
So I think that too is sometimes we see the positive in
Yep.
all things, or we're trying to, I don't want to say mask things, but we're trying to see the goodness in all the things.
Yep.
And so I just kind of gave me that light bulb moment when you were saying that when you first met that person, you're seeing the greatness that they have, which sometimes too, not everybody can see that.
Yep.
instantly go to the negative. And so I think that too is a great quality that we have, but sometimes can almost blur our decision making. And so
Absolutely.
even for you too, through this process, sometimes some people hire people because of their values or maybe to their attitude and their personality. Oh, they're trainable.
Yeah.
What would you say to that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think it's a both and. So I think there are many gifts in seeing someone's potential. It's funny because many, many, many years ago, I remember I was dating someone, and one of my girlfriends said to me, she's like, Sarah, I think you're dating this person's potential. You're not dating them who they are in this moment. I was like, oh my goodness, you're right. So I think there are gifts, like you're saying, to be able to see someone's potential. And also, there's, of course, a shadow side to this. So I think it's a both and. So in general, I think there can be a lot of benefit in hiring people who have high potential. They have a high ceiling. They can be trained. They can be coached. They can learn some of the mechanics and the tactics of the job at hand. So I am very much in favor of that within the right context and within the right type of organization. In my business, in my company, it's a small company. And so sometimes the need is more immediate where there is a fundamental skill set that is needed. And the way that I think about it within the context of, my company, which is much smaller, is it's both. So it's like I am often looking for a specific skill set, and also, someone who has the potential to continue to grow and evolve with the company over time. So, I would say, overall, I think it's a both and, um, looking for the foundations of what is needed and also, honoring that potential. I would also say that unfortunately, the research shows that interviews are often not that effective. So this is a soapbox that I have found myself lovingly on lately with some of my clients as well, because um, what I find oftentimes within organizations is the hiring process involves, an application, a resume submission, whatever it is, and then a bunch of interviews. And unfortunately, the data shows that we as humans are not that good at interviewing. So we tend to either, select people who are like us, or there's data that says we tend to select people who we would want to go to the bar with and have a drink with and hang out with, who may or may not be a good fit for our company. I also find that the narrative is that, we're going to interview for culture fit. And while I think there is validity to that, and of course the interview has a place, I also find that overwhelmingly interview alone does not necessarily correlate to fit or success or, a long-term employee at the company. So, in my opinion, um, we need to offset the interview with some of these other tactical things that will help us really get a well-rounded view of the people that we're looking to bring on.
Yeah. And I bet the listeners too are probably thinking like, oh yeah, we've had a few doozies that we've hired over the years or new teammates or things that we overlooked. Or two, sometimes I feel like some people are instantly turned away because of one comment they said or one
Yep.
thing, oh gosh, they're going to bring challenge to us. So
Yep.
that they're not going to be a good fit, and I think that's the part with hiring is always such an interesting thing. I'm going through the interview process because some people could be great on paper, can show up great on stage. But yeah, getting them and actually seeing them do the work, that's a total different scenario sometimes.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And just to maybe ground our listeners in what we're
Yeah.
talking about when we're talking about the hiring process. So the process that I've landed on as of this moment in time, it kind of reverse engineers the process to get some of that information up front. So what I like to do now is first of all, if I have a post or if I have an opportunity, I will say, if you're interested, please send me an email with XYZ title. Or please send me a message with XYZ title and answer these 3 questions. And I have found it fascinating how oftentimes that alone will weed out probably 80 to 90% of the applicants. So I had a role that I was hiring for this last year, and truly 80 to 90% of the applicants sent in a generic batch, kind of a batch template, and only about 10% sent in, the customized note with the questions answered. And so that was extraordinarily helpful because I got many applicants. And on paper, many of them looked really good. But then I was able to narrow down, that top 10% who followed the format and answered the questions. So the first thing I have started doing is, if you're interested, please send a note with XYZ title and then, answer these 2 questions or whatever it is. So that's part 1 to really narrow the funnel based on that. And then what I have started doing more recently, which is a pretty big change from what I did in the past, is I actually start with a project up front. So I recommend that this is usually 1 to 2 hours of work, nothing more than that. And it's compensated. So for me, that's really important. If I have people applying and they're doing a project as part of the application process, I'm absolutely going to pay them for that. So there's a small paid project, and I recommend that it's something that's relevant, real, something that is actually they would actually be doing within the business. So for one of my recent hires, we had a small project where she was doing some research for something that I was working on, and then she submitted that. And what I find useful about that is you can look at the outcome and the work product, but you can also look at how they think about things and how they communicate. So for one of my recent hires, I loved how she communicated with me about the project. So she sent me the outcome and it was great. It was beautifully visually appealing, which is really important to me. And then her email communication made me just want to cry with joy because it was so organized. She had her, what she had done, she had it in bullet points and it was really easy to read. It was really clear. And then there was a natural warmth and caring and that values piece came through even through the project, even through that email, which was really, really helpful. So that was part 2, the paid project. And again, for me, I like to assess outcome, but also way of thinking and way of communicating, both for clarity and also values alignment. Then from there, what I did this last time, and again, this worked out really well, was I did references next. So I still haven't done an interview. We're communicating via email, asynchronously. I have the project, then I've done the reference check. So, then I get to talk to real people who have worked with this person, ask specific questions about their work, what type of work this person did, how it went, any, things to look for, how to make the role work best with this person's strengths. And then finally, after all of that, I did the interview. So I put that at the end. And again, for me, I'm solving for my own bias where I know I can get excited about people in the interview, but now I have 3 data points that are really, really strong. And then the interview is sort of like the cherry on top. So for me, this has worked really well and it has very much helped me improve just aligning fit with opportunity. And again, solving for that bias that I might have toward positivity that we talked about.
Ooh, well, there's so many things right there where I feel like too, if the person's really not into this or really not dedicated or really
Yes.
want this job, they're not going to
Yep.
waste time going through it. So
Yeah. Yep.
you're weaning yourself out.
Yeah,
And
and making sure that they like the nature of the work because that's really important too, right? If they're like, oh, this is not the kind of project I want to be doing, I want them to be able to opt out too because I want it to feel joyful for not just me, but also, of course, for them.
ooh, I love this so much. And this is where I think too, it's thinking outside the box. Then what the
Hmm.
typical society says, you have to do the interview first, see the cover letter, all the resume, all that stuff, where I love seeing this different thought process. And so I appreciate you sharing this because I think sometimes too, when some people find a way to do things, they don't always want to share it,
Oh,
you know? The secret sauce. And I feel like this is something that could be really helpful. I'm just even thinking of a client right now that's going through a hiring process where I'm like, ah, this is how you should think differently too. And you can see them in action, even too through this process. Now that you've adjusted this, are there any other little things that are quick aha moments for you once then even they start working? Because they're getting to understand you too through this process more of like, I bet you're kind of trying to find little things about them that you probably weren't expecting. Like how you even said earlier, I like it looking pretty.
mm, mm.
Recognize that of yourself before this project, like before doing this process, that's one thing that you really like appreciate.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And most people who have worked on my team know that about me. So yeah. So yeah, things having visual, looking visually appealing is important. I think the big thing that is important to me, but it can be a little bit hard to assess up front is, um, alignment in how we communicate with clients, for example, in a way that really represents the values and the feeling of our brand. So I would say that in general, Zing Collaborative is very, we strive to be very warm. We have really deep relationships with our clients, and also, of course, professional. So there's sort of this balance between, warmth and there's an element of, friendliness and casual interaction, but also, of course, like professional, and we have a value of integrity. So there's this balance of these things that, in an ideal world, we are holding anytime we are communicating or interacting with our clients. And what I've observed is that that can be taught. And, I have worked with team members over the years to teach that. And also, with some candidates who've applied, or some members of the team, there's a natural way that shows up, where, through those initial emails that came through very clearly. So with several of my most recent team members, they naturally communicated in a way that was really aligned with our company and our brand. And so with one of my previous team members, it jump started how quickly I felt comfortable with her communicating with our clients, because I knew that there was a natural warmth, professionalism, quality to her communication. And so it was very easy for me to then, expand our work into also communicating with our clients.
Okay, because that was going to be my other kind of question too, is have you changed the process now too after they're onboarded, where only, is it 90 days until they're going to get in front of clients, getting into the actual thing? Have you adjusted anything, or is it too, depending on how that person is and how they're showing up through the process and the onboarding now that, you're kind of adjusting depending on that person and the person that you're hiring at the moment? Like, have you noticed anything different too with the onboarding process that you've done?
Yeah, I don't have a specific time frame along those lines. Typically, I will start with more project-based work that's a little more discrete in nature, and then we'll build from there. I think in the past, because I have had a couple of experiences that were a bit challenging bringing people in, I think I've been very in the past very hesitant to like give too much access, or open the floodgates too much, just because I have had a challenge with doing that in the past. But now with this process, I have felt more comfortable doing that earlier. So kind of screening for some of these things up front, doing the references, particularly doing references from people who have businesses in similar situations. For example, working with highly confidential information, highly sensitive information. As an executive coach, our conversations are extraordinarily confidential. Every document, everything we do largely is confidential. And so that's been something as well when I'm doing the reference checks of people who maybe worked in financials or human resources or things like that, where this person was handling highly sensitive or highly confidential information. So and hearing how that went. So that has helped me as well to be able to onboard them perhaps more quickly, having that information up front.
Mhm. This is so insightful today. I'm not going to lie. Like,
Oh, good.
just even to the post where I'm just like, yeah, I hope the listeners are just getting aha moments of like, yeah, we should really think about this. And I feel like this too is, yes, you are a smaller business, but bigger companies could also utilize this process and be creative about it and figure out too, how can we wean some of these people out that are not ideal? I feel like
Yeah.
right now with this world, it's easy to quick apply,
Yeah.
send my resume. And instead too, like how you can actually bring the human to interact with it ahead of time and building that connection and seeing maybe the challenges quicker, faster.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And from a very, tactical perspective, if we think about, especially let's say we're hiring for a higher level role where we have either panel interviews or we have a lot of people interviewing this person, if we start to calculate the time and the cost of those interviews, let's say we have someone interview with 3, 6, 9, 10 people, which is not uncommon for a significant role, and you start to calculate the time involved with that, that's very, very expensive. And unfortunately, again, I have seen just many times that if we're putting all of our eggs in the basket of an interview and making hiring decisions on that, it's not there's not necessarily a correlation of whether that person's going to work out. So if you take the the cost of a hire who doesn't work out, which is very high. And then you take the cost of having all those people in the interview and the panel, all of that. And then even the cost of that person's time, if you have a candidate that you put through, 3, 6, 9, 12, 20 hours of interviews, that's a really expensive process. And there's not necessarily a guarantee that it's going to work out or not. Again, if you don't have any other mechanisms in play. So again, like functionally, tactically, if we're thinking about ROI, ROI of the hiring process, to me, some of these little things they're very small additions to the process that can help us make better decisions and hopefully, save money in the long run by valuing everyone's time and making the best possible decisions.
You and I think very alike, because I've always thought that too, of like how much money is being spent
Yep.
getting people together, and
Yes.
and the time and energy, and two, are they even really focused on what's even going on, and just you're rotating in a bunch of different new people. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this topic, because I know the listeners are going to have a lot of aha moments and takeaways from this. And so I appreciate you very much. And I appreciate that we got to do this together on our first conversation ever
Yes.
meeting each
Likewise.
other. Oh,
Likewise.
I love it so much. Well, keep shining bright, keep sharing that knowledge. And I appreciate you sharing that knowledge too, and not putting it just to your heart. Because I think that's one thing too, is hopefully it inspires other people to share cool knowledge that
Mm,
learned or things that you've found helpful. Because yeah, it's unfortunate some of the headaches that you've had over the years of why you've come up with this process.
yes. Yes, lessons learned. And if anyone who's listening is interested in referencing this on the blog, on my blog at zingcollaborative.com, I do have a blog post that outlines this step by step. So people are welcome to go check that out if they're interested. If anyone is working on this in-house inside of an organization, one other tool that people might find helpful is if you Google Harvard Business Review meeting cost calculator, you can go on there and you can calculate the cost of your meetings, or in this case, interviews. And if anyone is maybe trying to advocate for, you know, a tweak or two to their hiring process, that could be compelling data as you're making that case. And then maybe the last thing I would say is just if you are going through interviews, making sure that everyone is effectively prepared for the interviews. Oftentimes I have observed that the people doing interviews have no tools to conduct effective interviews. So do they have a set of questions to ask? Do they know what they're asking for? Do they know how to ask good questions? And then I guess maybe a final piece would be just making sure that everyone who is involved in the hiring process is aligned on what is the role that we are hiring for? What are we actually looking for? What would make a successful candidate for this role? And is everybody on the same page about that ahead of time? Because again, unfortunately, I think oftentimes we'll go into the process, we'll do all these interviews, and then we'll realize maybe midway through the hiring process or even after the person is hired, oh shoot, I had a very different idea of what this person was going to be doing as compared to you. And now we're in a bit of a pickle because we hired someone with very different expectations. So just a few little nuggets to leave folks with if they're interested in, diving
Oh,
into this topic further.
oh, so many great things. And that too, I just love how you're thinking about this and pinpointing on those things, because so many teams aren't prepared and they're just
Right.
kind of like, you're going to go do this.
Yep.
And I think of that so many other things too in buckets with some businesses about networking and branding and all those things. That's where I feel like we could talk hours.
Yes.
Um, so thank you so much for focusing on this, because this isn't a topic that I have really talked about
Oh,
on the
cool.
podcast.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and connect with Sarah. This was so lovely. So thank
Thank you,
you.
Dawn.